My name is Lena. I am 15 years old. I live in a small town called Arosen in northern Canada. It is quiet here. There are many trees and lakes. The winters are long and cold. Most people here work with wood or on farms. I used to live with my mother in Toronto, but she passed away 1 year ago. After that, I came to live with my father. He lives alone in a wooden house near the forest. I had not seen him for many years before that. I remembered very little about him. Everything felt new, strange, and a little cold, like the snow outside his window. My father is not like other fathers. He does not talk much. He builds wooden things in his garage, tables, chairs, boxes. He says little when we eat. Sometimes I try to ask him questions, but he just nods or says maybe or we'll see. I do not know if he is sad or just quiet, but I know that when he looks at me, something in his face changes. He tries to smile, but it looks like he is trying to remember how to smile. Maybe he feels bad. Maybe he remembers how he left us. I do not know, and I do not ask. When I first arrived, the house did not feel like home. My room had dust on the shelves. There were old boxes filled with tools and paper. My bed was just a mattress on the floor. There were no pictures on the walls. Nothing soft or warm. The kitchen was clean but empty. No cookies in the jar. No color on the plates. Just gray, brown, and quiet. One night after dinner, I stood by the window and looked outside. The snow was falling slowly. The forest behind the house looked black in the dark. I saw something move. A white shape. It was big and quiet. At first I thought it was a deer, but then I saw its wings. It was a bird. A very large bird. I pressed my face to the glass. The bird moved with grace, like it was floating over the snow. Then it stopped. It turned its head and looked at me. It had a long neck, white feathers, and thin black legs. I had never seen anything like it before. "Dad," I said, turning quickly. "There's a big bird outside." He came to the window slowly. He looked for a long moment, then nodded. "It's a crane," he said. "A crane?" I repeated. "A whooping crane. Very rare. We used to see them here when I was young, but now almost none are left." "Is it lost?" I asked. My father did not answer. He just kept looking. Then he turned and walked back to the table. I stayed by the window until the crane disappeared into the trees. The next morning, I woke early. I walked outside in my boots and coat, looking for the crane. There were soft tracks in the snow, like little moons where its feet had touched the ground. I followed them past the garage, through the trees, down to the edge of a frozen pond. But the tracks stopped there. I looked across the ice, but there was nothing. Just snow, trees, and silence. At school, I did not talk much. The kids there already had their groups. Some looked at me like I was strange. Maybe because I came from a city. Maybe because I was quiet. During lunch, I sat alone. I watched the snow fall outside the big window. I thought of the crane. I wanted to tell someone about it, but no one looked interested. When the bell rang, I walked home with my head down. That night, I asked my father more about the crane. "How many are left?" I asked. "Not many," he said. "Maybe 200 in this part of the world. They're careful birds. And the world is loud. Why is it here? Isn't it too cold?" He looked at me and said, "Sometimes a bird forgets where to go. Or maybe it's the last one left." I did not speak after that. I thought of the bird, alone in the trees. I thought of myself, sitting alone at school. I wondered if the bird also felt like it did not belong. I wondered if it missed someone. A mother, maybe. A sister. A friend. In the days that followed, I began to go to the forest after school. I took a piece of bread or some seeds and left them near the pond. Sometimes I saw the crane from far away. Sometimes I didn't see it at all. But I kept going. It felt like something I had to do. I started drawing it in my notebook. Its wings. Its eyes. Its strong, thin legs. I gave it a name. Snowlight. I never told my father. It was my secret. Something just for me. One afternoon, as I placed a small piece of bread on a flat stone, I heard a soft sound behind me. A low call, like wind in a flute. I turned slowly. Snowlight stood only a few steps away. It looked at me with one eye, then the other. I held my breath. My heart beat fast. I did not move. The bird stepped closer. Then it reached out its long beak and took the bread from the stone. It did not fly away. It just stood there, watching me. And for a moment, I felt like I was seen. Not just looked at, but truly seen. From that day on, Snowlight came closer. I brought food every time. Sometimes I sat on a log and talked to it. I told it about school, about my mom, about how I felt in this new place. The bird never spoke, of course, but it listened. Or at least it stayed near, which felt almost the same. I did not feel so alone anymore. The world was still cold, but not empty. One evening, I came back late from the forest. My father was waiting at the door. "Where were you?" he asked. "Just walking," I said. "In the snow? It's almost dark." I nodded. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You go there a lot." "To the pond." "I like it there," I said. He didn't say anything more. But the next day, I found a pair of warm gloves on my bed and a small thermos for tea. A week later, it happened. I was by the pond, waiting for Snowlight, when I heard something. A loud engine. A machine. I turned and saw a large yellow truck moving through the trees. It had big wheels and a wide metal blade in front. Behind it were men with tools and flags. They were marking the land. They were going to cut down the trees. "No," I said out loud. "They can't. Not here. I ran back home. My father was in the garage. Dad, they're cutting the trees near the pond. He looked up. What? Machines. Men. They're going to destroy it. That's where Snowlight lives. He stood up quickly and followed me outside. We ran through the snow to the edge of the forest. From there, we saw the truck. Trees were already falling. The crane was not in sight. Do something! I cried. You have to stop them! He looked at the men, then back at me. His face was tight, serious. I'll talk to them, he said. You go back inside. No, I'm staying. We walked toward the workers. My father raised his hand and shouted. The truck stopped. The men looked confused. He spoke to them, pointing, waving his arms. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the worry on his face. He was trying. He was really trying. After a few minutes, the men got back in their truck and left. The machine backed away. The trees stood still once more. Did it work? I asked when he returned. For now, he said. But they'll be back. They want to build houses. They think this land is empty. It's not empty, I said. It's home. He looked at me. Yes, he said. It is. Before I share the rest of my story, could you please tell me where you're from? It gives me strength to know there's someone out there who listens to me, who understands me. It means a lot to me. After the workers left that day, my father and I walked back in silence. The sky had turned soft gray, and the wind picked up between the trees. It was the first time I had seen him speak up for something. Before that, he had always been quiet, almost hidden in his own world. But when he saw the machines near the forest, something changed. Maybe he saw how much it mattered to me, or maybe he already knew but needed a reason to act. Either way, something between us had shifted. That evening, he pulled out a large folder filled with papers, maps, and drawings. He placed it on the kitchen table and turned on the lamp. I sat across from him. He started showing me pages with red lines, bird paths, and notes. He told me that the cranes followed the same route every year. They came from the north and flew down to warmer places before winter. Some stayed in wetlands in the south, but most kept flying far beyond. He explained how the forest near our house was one of the last stopover spots left in this area. Without it, the birds would not have food or rest before the long journey. Most people didn't care because it looked like empty land. But it wasn't empty at all. It was full of life. And now, someone wanted to build houses on top of it. For the first time, I saw my father not as a stranger, but as someone who cared deeply about something. He told me that before I came, he had stopped trying to fight. He had sent letters, made calls, but no one listened. He gave up. But when he saw me with Snowlight, he remembered why he started. I had reminded him that something still mattered. From that night, we began working together. He showed me how to use a small tracking device. It looked like a tiny necklace for birds. He explained how it could send signals to a computer when the bird moved. If we could track Snowlight and prove she used this land, we might stop the construction. I agreed right away. It felt like a mission, and it felt important. Each day after school, we prepared food and checked the equipment. I still went alone to the pond. Snowlight had grown used to me. She no longer waited at a distance. She would come close, stand beside me, and gently take the food from my hand. I watched her closely, learning the patterns in her feathers, the shape of her eyes, the way she moved her wings when the wind changed. She was wild and free, but she trusted me. That made me feel strong and careful at the same time. The day we placed the tracker was quiet and cold. I held it in my hand, heart beating fast. My father watched from behind the trees, not too close. I slowly stepped toward Snowlight and gently slipped the band around her neck. It was light and soft, and she did not resist. When it clicked in place, she shook her feathers and looked at me. I whispered that it was okay, even though I knew she couldn't understand. But maybe, in some way, she did. That night, we watched the small screen on my father's computer. A tiny green dot appeared, blinking slowly. Snowlight had moved 20 meters. Then she stopped. Then she moved again. We smiled at each other. It was working. We could see where she went, how she lived, and we had proof. It felt like magic. But it was science and patience. That made it even better. The next few weeks were filled with snow, planning, and quiet hope. We gathered all the data and created a report. My father knew a woman who worked with the local council. She agreed to look at the papers and help us speak at the next town meeting. I was nervous, but also proud. I had not only found a bird, I had found purpose, something that gave shape to my days. But something else was changing too. My father started asking questions about school, about my drawings, and even about my mother. I didn't always answer, but when I did, he listened. He didn't try to fix the past. He didn't say sorry in big words. But he stayed in the room, kept his eyes on me, and gave me space to speak. That was enough for now. One afternoon, after I returned from the forest, I found a box on my bed. Inside was a sketchbook with thick paper and colored pencils. My father had left a note that said, "For your birds." I smiled for a long time. I didn't need more than that. One day, something unexpected happened. When I reached the pond, I found Snowlight walking in a circle, calling softly. I looked around and then saw them 2 smaller birds, barely able to walk. They had the same long necks and thin legs, but they were much smaller. Snowlight had not been alone. She had a pair of young cranes with her. I felt joy rise inside me like sunlight. Snowlight had become a mother, and somehow she had chosen this place for her chicks. I ran home and told my father. He looked surprised, then serious. "This changes everything," he said. "If we can show they nested here, the council can't allow construction." It's protected land for species with young. We set up cameras, made more notes, and added the new birds to the report. I named them Cloud and Flicker. They were still weak, but full of energy. I watched them stumble over stones, stretch their tiny wings, and follow Snowlight like shadows. My heart felt full in a way I hadn't known for a long time. But peace never lasts for long. 1 week later, we saw the trucks again. They returned with more flags and more men. My father called the council. The meeting was in 3 days, but the men said they had permits. He told them to stop. They did not listen. I watched the trees fall again. It felt like someone was tearing pages from my story, one by one. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the birds, about what would happen if the forest was gone. I knew I had to do something. I took out my sketchbook and began drawing the forest, the pond, Snowlight, and her chicks. I drew the path I walked each day, the place where I left food, the tree where she stood and looked at me. I stayed up until my hands ached. In the morning, I showed my father. He looked at each page carefully. Then he said, "These will speak louder than words." At the council meeting, my father spoke first. He used big words and maps. He showed the data and the photos. Then they asked if I wanted to say something. My hands were cold. My voice shook at first. But I stood up and said what I needed to say. I told them how Snowlight had changed everything for me. I told them that when I arrived, I felt lost. I felt alone. But in that forest, I found a reason to wake up, to learn, to try. And if they cut it down, they would not only lose trees, they would lose a place where life began again. I handed them my sketchbook. They turned the pages slowly. One woman wiped her eyes. One man nodded. Then they thanked me. We left the meeting unsure of what would happen, but something inside me was calm. I had done everything I could. The rest was not mine to control. 2 days later, we received the letter. The council had voted to stop construction. The forest would remain. The pond would be safe. And the cranes would have their home. That evening, we walked to the pond together. The snow had melted. The air was warmer. We saw Snowlight standing near the water. Her chicks were beside her, now stronger and taller. They saw us and did not run. Snowlight raised her head and looked at me. Then, slowly, she opened her wings. My father put his hand on my shoulder. I didn't speak. I just watched as Snowlight took a few steps, then ran across the water, lifting into the air. The chicks followed, smaller but determined. They rose higher and higher, circling once above the trees, and then they were gone. After the council stopped the construction, things in our town stayed quiet, but everything inside me had changed. It was hard to explain to others what had happened. People at school still walked past me like I was no one, and some teachers still spoke to me like I might disappear. But I didn't feel invisible anymore. something had shifted inside me. I had stood up and spoken. I had helped save something that couldn't speak for itself. That feeling stayed with me, even when nothing else did. At home, my father and I started to fall into a rhythm. It was not perfect, and we didn't suddenly become close like in movies, but we understood each other more. He would leave me little things, sometimes an extra apple in my bag, a new notebook, an article about cranes. I would help him carry tools or write emails. We didn't talk about the past much, but we didn't need to. The forest had become our language. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than usual, and green things began to rise from the ground. The pond grew wider as the ice disappeared, and frogs returned with their evening songs. Every few days, we spotted Snowlight and her 2 chicks, Cloud and Flicker. They had grown taller. Their wings looked stronger. They followed their mother more confidently now. Each time I saw them, I wondered how much longer they would stay. I knew the time would come when they would have to leave. One morning, I found my father outside with a small box. Inside were tags, wires, and a tiny transmitter. He had been building another tracker, one that could reach longer distances. He told me that the local bird center was now watching Snowlight too, and they wanted to follow her full migration. If we could guide her through the first part of her journey, others would help her from there. At first, I thought he meant using the tracker alone, but then he showed me something that made my mouth fall open. In the back of the garage, hidden under a tarp, was a small glider. It looked like a giant kite with a seat in the middle. My father explained that years ago, before I came, he had worked on a flying machine. He had built it for fun, but also because he loved birds. He had studied how cranes fly and wanted to follow them, to understand them better. He never finished it. But now, he said, he wanted to try again. I didn't know what to say. The thought of my quiet, serious father flying through the sky felt strange. But he was serious. He started working on it every day after lunch. He tested the wings, the wires, the balance. He called some old friends for help. They came and gave advice, helped fix small parts, and even offered to take turns flying with him. But when I asked if I could fly too, he shook his head. He told me it wasn't safe. He said it was too risky. I felt angry for a moment. I had been the one feeding Snowlight. I had found the chicks, spoken at the council, and helped gather all the data. I wasn't just a child anymore. But I didn't argue. I waited and watched. The day of the test flight came on a soft morning. The air was calm, and the sky was pale blue. We pushed the glider to the open field near the forest. Snowlight and her chicks stood nearby, watching us with still eyes. My father checked everything twice. Then he climbed into the seat. A small team helped pull the glider forward, and then, slowly, it rose. At first it looked strange, like a leaf caught in the wind. But then it steadied. My father flew over the pond, past the trees, and into the open sky. Snowlight followed. She opened her wings and lifted into the air. Cloud and Flicker came next, their smaller wings shaking at first, then growing steady. The four of them moved across the sky like a silent story. I stood below, my hands tight, my heart louder than ever. For the next week, they practiced. My father would lead the cranes a little further each day, then return. He studied their movement, their turns, their rest stops. He showed me the paths they used and the small fields they liked. I began to understand their rhythm even more. Then, the night before the real journey, something unexpected happened. A strong wind came, faster than we had seen in months. It blew down branches and tossed buckets across the yard. I stayed awake, heart racing, listening to the sound of trees creaking. I thought of the glider and hoped it was safe in the garage. When I woke in the morning, I saw my father outside, bent over the machine. Part of the wing had torn. A rod had cracked. He tried to fix it, but I could see from his face that it was not possible. The others who helped said it would take days to repair. But Snowlight could not wait. She was ready. Her body, her wings, her calls all pointed south. If she stayed too long, she would lose the season. I looked at my father. He looked at me. He knew what I was thinking before I even said it. I had been with Snowlight from the beginning. I knew her paths, her stops, her signs. I wasn't afraid. I had watched every part of the glider being fixed and tested. I knew how it worked. I wanted to fly. At first, he said no. He said I was too young, that it was too dangerous. I didn't argue. I just went to my room and waited. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I let the silence speak for me. Later, he came and sat beside me. He placed the keys on my table and whispered that he would ride behind me in the truck, as far as the road could follow. The next morning, I wore 2 sweaters and a thick coat. I tied my hair back. I checked the straps and the wires. I walked to the field where Snowlight stood, her head high. I stepped into the glider and looked up at the sky. It was clear. The wind was soft. When I lifted into the air, I felt no fear, only a deep, full breath, like I had waited my whole life for this moment. Snowlight flew beside me, her wings steady and wide. Cloud and Flicker stayed close, trying to match her strength. We moved as one. The ground below looked smaller with each second. Trees became shapes. Rivers became lines. The sky opened around me like a door. For hours we flew, stopping in fields, resting near rivers, sleeping beside the road where my father met us with food and fuel. Each time I saw him, he smiled and nodded. He never told me to stop. He never tried to take the journey from me. He simply stood and watched. On the 4th day, we reached the wide stretch of land before the ocean. The cranes had to cross this part alone. I could not fly over the water. I landed and watched them go. Snow Light turned once in the sky and made a soft call. Then she flew forward with Cloud and Flicker beside her. I sat in the field long after they disappeared. My legs were tired, my eyes full. I thought of everything my mother, my old life, the quiet dinners, the forest, the meeting, the drawings, the broken wing, the silent flight. All of it had brought me here. When I returned home, things were quiet again. But I was not the same girl who had arrived with a suitcase and sad eyes. I had learned how to care for something without words. I had learned how to listen. I had learned how to lead and how to let go. A month later, we received a message from the bird center. Snow Light had arrived in Spain. Cloud and Flicker were safe. The tracker showed they had made the full journey. My father printed the message and placed it on the fridge. It is still there. Sometimes I walk to the pond and sit by the water. I imagine Snow Light landing again someday. Maybe not this year, maybe not ever. But the forest is still here. The trees still stand. The cranes still have a home. And so do I. I hope you have enjoyed the story. Like and comment if you want to hear more soon.